Welcome to Mindful School Marketing, your go-to podcast for personal and professional growth.
We're school marketers, business owners, and moms passionate about connecting other school professionals with tools and strategies for success.
We love solving problems, exploring new ideas, and thinking outside the box. Let's transform your school and life starting right now.
Welcome to Mindful School Marketing. I'm Tara Clays.
And I'm Aubrey Bursch. Today, we're joined by Timo Newwood. Timo leads the marketing team at Digistorm, a software company that specializes in K-12 schools. Unlike most tech marketers, he believes in the power of building brands around the people they're meant to serve, and then using a mix of traditional and digital channels to connect with the audience. Professionally, he's worked as a solo marketer and within larger marketing teams in the travel, technology, and now the education space. He lives in what's called the Sunshine State of Queensland in Australia, which might explain why he's a firm believer there's enough sunshine in the world for all of us. Welcome, Timo.
Hello.
Hi, Timo. Thanks for joining us today. We're really glad to see you, and we've seen you before, but it's good to see you again. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So as Aubrey mentioned, I live in Queensland in Australia. I live in a town called Brisbane with my partner and my little golden doodle called Coco. And we have a little white picket fence life, I have to say, and it's kind of nice and it feels good. I am originally from South Africa, though. I grew up across a couple of cities in South Africa as a kid and then left after university. So I've kind of traveled my way around the world. Super passionate about travel. As a young kid, I used to go and sit on the rooftop, and we were under a big flight path to one of the airports. And I'd always think, oh, one day I'm going to get on one of those planes and go somewhere. And the only way I could do that was to take a job as a flight attendant. And I ended up being a flight attendant with the intention of just doing it for a year or so. And it ended up being a 5 or 6 year stint, which was fun. So travel has always been a big part of my life. And then professionally kind of moved into the travel industry after that, and technology. And yeah, it kind of just grew from one thing to the other, and found my happy place when I moved from a sales role into a marketing role. And that's kind of how I landed in marketing, really like an accidental marketer, I'd say. Found my happy space, found what I felt was a good career fit for me. And I've just loved it ever since. And I've been in marketing probably for the last 10 or 12 years now.
That's so fun. I love how people end up in marketing, but they have this long route to get there, and that you were a flight attendant, which I think is so cool. And you mentioned it's not exactly glamorous.
No, not exactly. And I've got a couple of embarrassing celebrity moments that some of the worst moments of my life, to be honest. And it was, so I flew for a big Middle Eastern airline, and we were traveling all over the world. And I did a flight from Doha to London. Family booked out the whole of first class, and I was working up front. Didn't quite realize who they were. Served them the whole flight. And as they got off in London, trying to make chit chat, I told the gentleman, "Oh, you must love tennis. You have so many bags filled with tennis rackets." And it ended up being Rafael Nadal and his kids going to Wimbledon with his nanny and all the rest, and they were playing Wimbledon 2 days later. So couple of really, really embarrassing moments, but still good fun. He took it in great spirits, and yeah, he was a really nice guy.
Maybe he was relieved not to be recognized. He's probably
Probably, yeah. That's right.
Meanwhile, you're like, man, you must love tennis, buddy.
That's it. Just trying to strike up a conversation because they'd been sleeping the whole night. It was an overnight flight and barely spoke a word. And I was just trying to make sure that they felt there was a little bit of love for them before they left.
Oh my goodness, I love that. And you're like one of those people, Timo, since I met you, and you can strike up a conversation. You always put people at ease. So I can see why being a flight attendant would be a good fit for you.
It's good fun. It was good fun.
I'm curious now, if we want to shift gears a bit, we are really excited to dive into today's topic, and you so generously come on today to talk to us about something that I know our audience will love to talk about, and that's like Gen Y and Gen Z. So as we're thinking about this topic, I know your role and work in enrollment and marketing gives you unique insight into this. Can you define these groups? Like, when were they born? How old are they now? And then can you share like how they might impact the way we communicate, market, and engage with prospective and current families?
Yeah, really good, good and interesting topic, and I think super, super relevant for anybody who works in any field really, but especially at schools at the moment. So I think we're at this unique crossroads where there's these, I'll say, three generations kind of coming together. So we have our Gen Xers who were sort of mid 60s through to the early 80s. I think they're really important because they're the grandparents at the moment, or early grandparents, kids at the end of high school. So from a gifting and donation point of view, I think they're becoming really important. And then secondly, we've got our millennials who, Gen Y, kind of make up the bulk of our parenting cohorts at the moment. So mid 80s through to the late 90s, and then late 90s through to the sort of 2010-ish, 2012, we've got our Gen Z. So their kids are starting to come into the system. If you're a popular school, they're most likely starting to waitlist for your early years. And I think what the challenge might be looking at all three of these is that they come with very, very different expectations. They have different levels of interaction with technology, so they expect technology in different ways. If you think about how dating worked and how banking works for a early Gen Xer versus a Gen Z, it's completely different. And if you're from Gen Z or a late millennial, you're probably doing your banking, your dating, your medical transactions, anything online. Like, I speak to my doctor through an app these days. Like, that's just kind of how it works, right? And transferring that into one of the biggest investments a person would have to make a decision on, i.e. their child's education, I think there's a lot of opportunity and challenge there for us all.
Yeah, definitely. I think the definitions it's always fun to see where you fall yourself and where your family members fall, and it makes me feel extremely old. I know you two are a bit younger than me, and you know, my kids are old enough to start having kids just about, so they're going to be the parents coming up, and it's a little bit frightening, but but let's talk about challenges. So for the Gen Y and Gen Z, these upcoming parents, current and upcoming parents, what do you think the biggest challenges and opportunities are? Obviously, when you talk about everything being online and us being used to that, of course, you know, having online interactions with them is important, but what are some challenges with that too?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two things to it. The first is the way that I think the two different generations look at imaging and just the marketing collateral we put in front of them. I think Airbnb does an amazing job speaking to Gen Z. And if you look at their campaigns, it's visually very realistically driven. For millennials, so the Gen Ys, I think we still wanted to be sold the dream. It's quite emotive, the way that we did our videos for them, the way that we wanted to connect emotionally. And I think Gen Z seems to be a lot more intellectually driven by the advertising that's being put in front of them. And they can see through the shine and the stories that we tell through emotive advertising. So I think there's a big shift there. And what that means in reality for a school, I think, is that things like social proof become extremely important. So if I look at videos for schools at the moment, it would be quite emotive. It would tell a story of the child, of the whole child, and how that kind of translates into the outcome at the end of an education with your school. And if we look at what I think Gen Z is most likely going to be wanting is, what's a day in the life of my kid going to be like? What's their friends going to be like? What's the families that I'm going to be interacting with going to be like? And we can already start seeing that shift in the first sort of school videos that are coming through and the collateral being used. So I think that's one challenge. A second challenge, I think, is meeting families where they're at. So I mentioned before that you can do these really complex transactions online. Like, banking is such a complex transaction. You can remortgage your home most likely through an app if you really wanted to, or you could have deep conversations with a therapist online. Like, there's so many things you can do online that you traditionally would have done in person. And yet, if you look at schools, there's so many steps in the admissions journey that doesn't work that way yet. So we often see schools still have a 25-page manual form that has to be filled in, which in today's digital age, I think is quite challenging for parents. If if you've got to figure out where your nearest mailbox is to send that back to the school and things, there's a lot of small things that I think we can still work on as an industry to overcome these kind of challenges.
I love how you mentioned the forms because I mean, who owns a printer? I mean, I own one. I think it's gathering dust in the corner, but like printing out those things, like I'm always so frustrated when the school's like, oh yeah, download this and then fill it out and then have your doctor sign it and then upload it. I'm like, oh gosh, that's a lot of, there's got to be a better way.
That's it. And on the school side, it's so busy. It's just so busy. There's no time to process all of that data. Who has the time to take all of that 25 pages worth of personal information and things besides the risk, but just being able to transfer that into a spreadsheet or wherever it lives at the school, that's a big job. That's a lot of hours spent on that.
And it probably doesn't get done until the end of that school year. So then you got to start all over the next one.
Exactly. And we're so used to getting instant answers, right? So I think that's the other thing is if we're used to chatting to, a provider through an app or customer service when buying something online, you're able to have a quick chat and get things done. Where with a school, yes, there's more to it, but there's also I think parents wouldn't want to be waiting 3-4 days for a response anymore, which maybe was okay a few years back, but they're so used to with all the other brands they interact with quick responses and they're able to find information super fast. And yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges and how do we narrow that gap?
I want to jump in with another question. It's sort of it's a little bit of a tangent on this, but it's related. So we're talking about, marketing to parents and all of this technology that schools need to use. But I also want to kind of throw in here because we're talking to people who are behind the scenes of all this technology, right? Obviously, I am I guess I'm technically a Gen X person and I'm pretty tech savvy, but a lot of people who are working in schools now are not Gen Y and Gen Z. And so they have to then, not only do they have to offer this technology to their potential enrollees, but they also have to know how to use it themselves and embrace it too. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with that? Eventually they're going to be working and running these schools, right? But not yet. So talk about that if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, I love that. It is such a hard topic for us as somebody who has to provide these tools. Like it's such a tough one. So some of the things that we kind of have learned over the last year or two is I think hand-holding is really, really important. It's one of the biggest changes that you can bring into a school is, let's say, digitizing your admissions process, for example, right? So going from paper forms or having forms on your website to drive inquiries, etc., and that information falling into some form of a database automatically. So that's a really, really big change for a lot of schools. I think the way that we've kind of approached it is looking at how do we onboard schools effectively and give them the time and the space they need. So typically a school that comes to us and who signs up for this kind of technology for the first time still have multiple spreadsheets. So they'd have a spreadsheet for each year level and all their wait lists, and there'll be a heap of parent information and what the family's interested in and all those kind of things. So what we do is we try and help them take all of that information and transfer it over to the system so that number one, it lives in one place for them. And then number two, give them a few months to kind of onboard and learn where to click and which buttons to do and so on. So fortunately, our product is reasonably intuitive, so people learn it really fast, but it's more the mental shift, right? So going from a spreadsheet that you've worked on for the last 10 or 15 years that you know inside out to trusting this new system. And that's what the schools tell us is that's their biggest challenge is as an enrollment officer is learning to trust a new system. And that trust only comes once they've seen the outcomes and they can start pressing one button and an enrollment contract is sent out, for example, or a follow-up email is automatically sent because the spreadsheet just can't do those kind of things for you. So as soon as they start seeing the time saving, that's, I think, when the mental shift starts happening and people are a little bit more open to working on the tech. And then our team are just great at literally hand-holding and spending as much time as they can with new clients, because that's the biggest challenge. If somebody has 6 or 7 weeks to kind of learn the system in an organized step-by-step way, I think that's probably been the most successful way to onboard new clients that aren't as tech-savvy potentially.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think I'm curious because when we're working with heads of school and also with teams who may not be as tech savvy, it's first making them aware of like what else is out there right now and how how things need to be done, and then the benefits, right? Of like saves you time and energy, right? So that you're not having to do all that manual input, and showing the value. And then it is the education piece. A lot of people aren't just aware of how important it is. It's not only making your life easier, it's making your prospective families' lives easier. So I think that's a huge hurdle to overcome. And it sounds like you have a good onboarding system for that. But people do need handholding. Anytime we're learning something new, you want to be able to ask a question and get an answer, just like our prospective families do when they're asking questions about your school. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious, as a global marketer and enrollment expert, like what trends do you think will be important heading into 2023?
I wish I had like a crystal ball that could tell it all to me. I would make so much money, right? Like it would just be one of those things if I knew. But I'd say a few things that I can kind of think of is I think school marketers and admissions teams in general are extremely busy. They wear multiple hats. We know, especially if you're in a small school, you're doing crisis comms, you're setting up your welcome packs, you're busy setting up interviews with your head of school, you're trying to get references for students that you're not sure if they're going to be a great fit for your school. You're trying to take videos, you're trying to make changes to your website. There's just so much going on. Normally it's a team of one, maybe two. Sometimes it's even it's other stuff that's just kind of caretaking the role. So no doubt that they're busy. I think at the same time, the pressure from boards is becoming pretty strong on schools to drive admissions because it is a big income source. Times are a little bit tough out there. Things are expensive. Schools need the income. So I think the two things coming together, i.e. very busy teams with limited resources and school board expectations increasing, is a challenge for next year. So I think what we're already seeing is that our current schools, so schools who already work with us, are asking for the product to evolve in a way to save them more time so that they can have the same amount of resources, but try and deliver more. So that's probably from a product trend kind of thing. I think something that we're kind of working on for the next year or two. How do you help the actual job be more efficient so that you can manage that? And then the second thing I think we're seeing here in Australia, but we're also seeing it in the UK and we're seeing it in the US, is that parent expectations are really increasing. And it's a little bit to what we discussed before about parents almost want instant answers. They want to be able to find information really quickly. Let's say, for example, I'm interested to know what your school's class sizes and special needs policies might be. I want to be able to find that information 11 o'clock at night when that's the only time I've got. I want to be able to find it on your website. I don't want to have to send an email, wait for the next business day, maybe 2 business days before I get that response, because I'm kind of in that moment now and I'm making the decision. So I think that's probably a trend as well, is how do we narrow that gap of making information more accessible for parents, just because their expectations are increasing. And then the final thing I think is, especially if you're in a very competitive area. So let's say we're in a metro area or in a medium-sized city where you have 2 or 3 schools, and it's reasonably competitive. I think if one school is really well funded and they're able to push the boundaries and make a bit more noise from a marketing point of view, I think it's really, really important as a smaller school to find what makes you unique. You can't necessarily compete with a massive budget for a big video or for a massive open day or something where you can recruit 100 families off one day. But if you find your magic ingredient and what makes you apart, and you really hone down on that message, I think that's such an important time for us to be doing that now with just the general state of the economy and things. I think it's important to find a way to cut through if you're a smaller school.
Yeah, I love the idea of well, all 3 of these things are interesting to follow, but I think the campaigns that you're talking about is something that I totally agree with. I want to talk about the admissions club.
Oh yeah.
So because my friend and co-host Aubrey participated in this amazing series that Digistorm put together. So I'd love to hear more about some of the takeaways that you had from that. and how it relates specifically to what we're talking about here, which is Gen Y and Gen Z.
Love that. Yeah, it was we put together this special web series. It is, I think, was it 14 episodes, 13 episodes? I can't even remember. It's been a blur, but there's over 20 hours of sort of short and practical videos that anybody who works in school marketing or admissions can watch and get a high level overview of a specific topic. So these topics are all things that you kind of need in your modern day school marketing toolkit. And yeah, Aubrey was kind enough to spend a lot of time with us and share some of her knowledge, and she is super knowledgeable. So that was she added so much value to it. I guess how we came about it was specifically because of this crossroads of the generations coming together. And we get a lot of questions from schools that already work with us in terms of how do I manage my social media, things that we don't necessarily work on, but they have a lot of questions on social media, on what's the difference between SEM and SEO and PPC and all these like very technical digital terms. We find that we work with a lot of school marketers who are more traditionally inclined. So they're really good with events. They're really good with drafting communication. They can get their school into any local newspaper with their PR contacts. But the digital side of marketing is a little bit tougher for them. And it's totally normal because it's two very different types of marketing, right? So the idea for this was, let's help you get the tools you need. And then if you have the tools you need, you're able to choose which ones work best for your schools, and you can speak to Gen X, Y, and Z really by combining these tools in a way. So in a strange way, because we can see the market is changing, so parents are changing what they want, we know that school marketers and anybody who works in admissions and driving admissions to a school probably need some different tools than they did 10 years ago. But it is very difficult to upskill. It's so easy for academic staff to get personal development and get all those things. But for school marketing teams, it's so much harder to get those personal development sessions or the budget to get it done. And they're just too busy sometimes. So we wanted to do something super short, sharp, practical. And they didn't know all the answers after, at least they knew what questions to ask to get some more information.
I think it was a really well done web series, because I know a lot of schools that either have marketers who have transitioned from being a teacher or in another role, and they're not quite sure like what to do in marketing, or, and especially with the ever-changing landscape of marketing, as you're talking about Gen Y, Gen Z, I mean, it's constantly changing. And so to have a series like that gives them kind of actionable nuggets to take away, I think was very beneficial for people. And plus it was fun to do, and fun to watch. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So through the lens of our podcast, we talk about mindfulness and how it applies to independent schools and marketing. So how do you define mindfulness, and how do you use it in your personal and professional life?
Yeah, so I think mindfulness for me it's a headspace, I think. It's a headspace of, for me personally, and I think this would be very different for everyone, it's a headspace of finding balance. I get overwhelmed if I have too many things going on. And I'm one of those people that kind of freeze up a little bit if it gets too crazy around me. And we all have our own way of dealing with kind of how we feel when we get overwhelmed. So mindfulness for me is creating that balance, sorting out the chaos so that I can kind of live life and be okay everywhere else. A few years ago, I didn't realize at the time, but I think I got pretty close to a corporate burnout without really just working so hard that you don't kind of realize that that's actually what's happening until you get out of the situation. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I took after that, because time is reflection is such a great teacher, right? Was that it's okay to fill your own cup. If you think, especially if you have a family to look after, if you've got aging parents, if you've got kids that need to be taken everywhere, if you've got trying to do a career, trying to get to gym, like there's so much on everyone's plate. I've only got 2 or 3 of those things on my plate. I'm exhausted when I get into bed every night. So I think finding the mental space to tell yourself it's okay to fill your own cup first so that you can do all of these other things, creating that little space for you is really, really important. That's probably the biggest thing I took from the time where I pushed it a little bit too hard for a little bit too long.
Thanks for sharing that. We are big proponents of filling your own cup. And sometimes that's really hard to do. Sometimes I think, habits die hard about treating yourself well, right? About feeling selfish when you're doing that. And so the more we talk about it, I think one of the great things about having this podcast and bringing up this topic every couple of weeks is making it okay to do that. Because I know, I don't want to like stereotype or gender type, but they talk about mom guilt a lot, and the idea of just kind of taking care of yourself is really important, but hard for many of us to actually put into practice without feeling like we're going the wrong way. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it very much. We are going to move into some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm going to try my best. Let's see if I can get all of this.
Okay. This is my favorite question. If you could put one book as mandatory reading on a high school curriculum, what would it be?
I think the thing that's lacking is financial education for most of us. I don't know if that's in schools these days, but I know for sure it definitely wasn't when I was in high school. I got gifted a book in my late 20s called The Richest Man in Babylon, and it was a story of parables sort of with financial lessons in them that were still relevant, I think 100 years ago, and they still are today. And I wish that book was made compulsory reading in high school, because it's a fun storybook style thing, but you get so much from it. And I probably would have made very, very different decisions in my early 20s if I had read that book.
I love that. Financial literacy is like, that was what when Tara and I did our episode, and we said that was my thing too. Yes, it's so important, right? I don't think anything was taught to me in high school, certainly not that. So I wish I'd read that book as well. Now, going on to another rapid fire question. What is one app you can't live without?
Yes. So I turned 40 this year, and I think I went through a little bit of a midlife crisis, and I couldn't afford a convertible. So I started going to gym, and my gym app has just been like the one thing that's been keeping me consistent and kept me engaged. I can see who's going to be in my class, and I've become friends with a lot of the people. We chase each other with our little leaderboard scores. And yeah, so my gym app at the moment is probably the one thing I really can't live without.
Is it a physical gym, or is it like a Peloton app?
Don't tell anyone, but I go to CrossFit. I'm part of the cult.
CrossFit. Okay.
I did CrossFit. Yeah, I did CrossFit for a bit, but now I'm on Peloton. But I totally get CrossFit. Like, it's so cool. So you have like the workout of the day and all that sort of thing. Like
right, that's it.
That's
really
exactly
cool. It. And you can put your little scores in. And I'm very lucky to go to a gym where we're all kind of friends in a way, and people are super supportive, and we all kind of chuck our ego in the bin when we walk in the door, which is really nice. So it's been a great environment and community to be a part of this year.
That's great.
If you're gonna have a midlife crisis, that's the one to have. Join the gym, get healthy, build.
I wish I could get the convertible, to be fair, but like I think
Okay, what are you reading right now?
So funny enough, actually books on mindfulness, which is interesting. My dad and I, so we obviously live in different countries, and for my 40th birthday, he ended up buying me a book that he was reading at the same time. So we're kind of book clubbing across continents at the moment, which is kind of cool. So it's called The Courage to Be Disliked, and it's by 2 Japanese authors, and it's kind of about, again, like kind of giving yourself that mental space to free yourself from others' expectations and so on. Like it's kind of that permission-based thing of you need to have your own space, and that's okay to have your own space. And it's been really, really super interesting. So that's the one. And then I've just started reading a book called The Happiest Man on Earth, and it's won some book prizes here in Australia. So I'm very keen to get into it. Only on chapter 1 or maybe just into chapter 2. And I think it's going to be a tough read, but I think it's going to be a very thought-provoking read. So it's about a Holocaust survivor. He's just turned 100 when he wrote the book. And it's kind of about how he found happiness and kindness after what was obviously a very dark start to his life. So I think it's going to be a very confronting but very thought-provoking book as I make my way through it.
Yeah, those are great. So I just ordered The Happiest Man on Earth, actually just yesterday as a gift for someone in my family. And I don't think my family listens to this podcast, so I think I'm safe there. But I also, I've not heard of the other book, but I love the title, The Courage to Be Disliked. I definitely need to read that. That sounds
Yeah,
cool.
it's pretty cool. And it's they've got another one. I think it's called the Courage to Be Happy, which I haven't read yet. But yeah, I'll let you know how this one goes. It's I'm excited. Dad and I are going to discuss it just before Christmas. So I've got another 2-3 weeks to from recording today to kind of get that done.
I want my son to be in a book club with me when I'm older. Just saying.
Oh.
My son better watch this podcast when he's older and be in a book club with me, because that's the best thing ever I've ever
Took
heard.
Dad 20 years to convince me. So
So I got a while is what I'm hearing. Oh my goodness. All right. So what is one great piece of advice you'd like to leave us with?
So I'm going to steal this one from a friend who gave me really good advice, but yeah, do it as a pay it forward. So I have a friend who only really found her passion later in life, and career-wise and everything else. And you could really tell that something had kind of changed with her, the way that she approached life. And she just seemed such a happy person. And she said she kind of discovered her beautiful. And the way she explained it was, she started focusing on her strengths in each part of her life. So what made her a beautiful friend, what made her a beautiful wife, what made her a beautiful mom, and what made her a beautiful colleague at work, or, you know, what did she enjoy doing at work. And she said once she started focusing on her beautiful in each of those kind of pieces of her life, everything just started blossoming from there, because she stopped focusing on, you know, other things that maybe she felt inadequate about. And we all suffer with, you know, comparing ourselves to others, and what is it, imposter syndrome, I think, that we face in tech and many other, you know, kind of jobs and things. So yeah, I think I took a lot from that, and I try and focus on the good and not the stuff that you can't do all the time. And so far it seems to be working for me, and I hope it works for your viewers and listeners too.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Timo, it's been really awesome having you with us today. Thanks for everything that you've shared, and for making me feel old. I appreciate that.
I'm so sorry.
And inspiring us.
It is it's been fun, and thank you for bringing this to life. I think it's such an important thing. It's everybody is so busy to have it in this format, and you're able to listen to it on, you know, your way to work in the morning, or on your way to school drop off, or wherever. You know, it's just so accessible. So thanks for doing it. It's a very cool podcast, and I love it.
Thank you.
Thank
Where can
you.
people find you online, Timo?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and it's Teemo Newwood. It's Timo, and then Newwood is Nieu, and there's not a lot of us, so it should pop up then. Otherwise, I believe it'll be in the show notes as well, or you can connect with you know, either Tara or Aubrey, and they'll get us connected. No dramas at all.
Yay. Thank you again.
No
Thanks
worries.
so
Have
much.
a wonderful evening, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on the Mindful School Marketing Podcast.
We'd love it if you pop into iTunes and leave a review, 5-star preferred. Let us know how you like the show. It helps us improve what we're doing and helps others find us too.